Hi, I'm Patrick Giguère with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology, and thanks for tuning into this video. In this one, I'm going to talk about the December 4th, 2021 solar eclipse in Scorpio. It's at 18 degrees of Scorpio in the Nakshatra, lunar mansion, the constellation of Jyeshta. And with that, just an FYI, I practice Vedic astrology, so not the mainstream tropical astrology. This is sidereal, so this is visible sky astrology. The sign placement of the planets sound different because in this system, it's where you see the planets when you look up in the sky. So, if things sound like they're wrong, it's because I'm using a whole different reckoning. So, I'm running behind on this as I make this video. It's the 13th of December, the eclipse happened on the 4th. But it's been a hell of an eclipse season for me. Eclipses are very transformative, and it's definitely been that for me. It's definitely helping me to restructure my life, and it's been tough to get videos made on top of everything else I do. You know, I've got the acupuncture practice and all that stuff. So I have to work around my schedule making these videos, and for a while it was just tough to get my thoughts together. I'm stirring a lot of emotions. Scorpio deals with anger, resentment, your deep fears, all kinds of really deep fundamental things in your life, especially your unconscious emotions. So it's been a hell of a time. It kicked up a lot of stuff for me, but I'm coming out of it, and so I'm playing catch up. So this is a very important eclipse. I'd say for any of us alive, it's possibly the biggest and most important eclipse. And it could prove over time to be one of the most important eclipses, maybe, I don't know, in the last few thousand years of human history. Maybe longer than that, who knows. But it's a biggie. And this eclipse really overshadows the month of December. If you saw my monthly video, I spend a lot of time talking about this eclipse, and I'm going to get into further depth in this video. But it's huge, I can't stress it enough, and I'm probably not going to do it justice all in one go. This is probably something I'm going to be talking about for a while. And that's because I use this term eclipse season, and eclipses are not just a light switch that just happened one day and then you just kind of move on. You feel their effects a month ahead of time before they actually occur, and then the effects take about 3 months to really unwind, and sometimes in that 3 months they come to fruition. Sometimes it takes that 3 months to just lay the groundwork for greater changes that are going to come. And this eclipse is a mix of both. We're going to see some developments by March, I'd say by the first, second week of March, due to these two eclipses, because 2 weeks before the December 4th solar eclipse, we had a lunar eclipse in Taurus in the opposite sign. So it's going to take about, I'd say, till the first, second week of March for things to start coming to fruition, and it's going to lay the groundwork for really the next 30 years. I think this decade we're really going to fight for our freedom in big ways, not just as Americans, but as a human family. And then all of this gaslighting that's been taking place, especially through the drug companies, through the scientific community, that have been, pushing these COVID vaccines on us and trying to scare the shit out of us so that they can make billions off of us getting these vaccines. All that deception is going to take really about, I'd say, the next 30 years to get really cleaned up. A lot of big things are coming up. I think even as Americans, and probably this is going to happen in other countries too. There's going to be succession. I think countries are going to break up over this whole thing, over the choice of, are we going to live in fear of COVID-19 and get a booster every month, or are we going to just live our lives with courage and accepting that change happens and you just have to roll with it. So this is going to divide the world. I think countries are going to break up, and the whole situation is not going to be cleaned up till about 2053. And that is when Saturn and Pluto meet up again. They'll meet up in Aquarius. Now, what was it? Yes. It was early January 2020. Saturn and Pluto met up in Capricorn. Saturn and Pluto always deal with gaslighting, because people gaslight because they want to control situations, because they're deeply afraid that things will not go their way. So they gaslight people. Being in Capricorn, it was about government gaslighting people. So, you know, we've been dealing with a lot of this. And really the gaslighting is coming down from, it starts with the mega banks and hedge funds who control the drug companies, who are now controlling government, especially through the advisory boards like CDC, World Health Organization, all that stuff. So there's major gaslighting, and we're not going to be, well, depending on where you live, in the freer areas, we're not going to be having shots and boosters, you know, pushed on us for the next 30 years. In some places people will. You know, if you get stuck behind what I consider to be enemy lines, where people are going to keep pushing these mandates harder and harder, then yeah, you might have to dodge this, or just basically go with it for the next 30 years if you find yourself in such a place. So yeah, a lot of major shakeups coming, but it's really to change basically the hierarchies in the world and the financial institutions and the political institutions. A full worldwide change is going to take 30 years. It's not going to, like I'm always saying, it's not going to be the Trump kumbaya. You know, it's like, oh, Donald Trump's going to be sworn into office by Christmas, and he's going to reign at the right hand of Jesus. You know, it's like, it's not that fucking simple. You know, and at the same time, it's not as simple as just like electing a Bernie Sanders or some other fake progressive to just be our messiah. We're going to have to deal with shit. We're going to have to clean up our own lives and help each other to clean up the external world. And coming back to the point, this eclipse lays the groundwork for all that, for the cleaning up of our own lives to make them more authentic, and for the cleanup of the world that's going to fully take the next 30 years. So, you know, an important point with that is this stuff is just not going to go away because some brilliant, handsome politician gets elected into office and just does it all for you. Those days of, you know, those Cold War days where we just kick back and watch the brilliant, handsome, charismatic politicians take care of everything for us. All we have to do is cheerlead them and go vote for them. That's all over. The days of kissing the asses of experts it's over. It's not coming back ever again. The Cold War was really an abomination. People see like the 50s, the 1950s and the 1980s as like, you know, these glory days. There's a lot of hidden ugliness behind those. Especially, you know, in the first world, we've been living high on the hog and living ignorant at other people's expense. So we've been living in prosperity because there are all these fucked up wars going on, and, you know, intelligence services staging coups and doing all kinds of crazy shit. So we've been living high on the hog at other people's expense. So we're gonna have to deal with all kinds of unpleasantness. And again, this eclipse is setting the groundwork for that. You know, Scorpio it does deal with magic, it deals with the occult, it deals with divination. It has an aspect where it deals with finance and money, especially when we're talking about institutional money. But Scorpio also deals with all of the unpleasantness and all of the creepy crawlies in your emotions that you can't just avoid forever. You know, you can't drink or smoke or fuck or eat or yoga or meditate your way out of that stuff. You have to just go into it and accept it. Once you see it, feel it, acknowledge and accept it, then you can release it. It starts unwinding. It doesn't have power over you. It has power over you when you're in denial. You don't want to deal with the unpleasant things in your own being and in your life. So whenever we get eclipses in Scorpio, we get planets going through Scorpio, conjuncting in Scorpio. It's times when we have to deal with all of the creepy crawlies in our emotions and in our lives. You know, and that leads me to a point too. You know, when you are dealing with meditation or qigong or yoga and you're just chasing bliss, that's an addiction, that's a drug. You know, you will get that out of authentic meditation practices, but a really useful, helpful, effective, authentic meditation practice is going to make you feel shitty sometime because you are honestly doing the work and getting through your baggage and letting it go. You know, it's like the whole new age concept of things, you know, like the San Francisco, Santa Fe, Sedona, Boulder approach to meditation, yoga, and qigong, where you just get all blissed out and you're like, oh, I just gotta raise my vibration and not think about that stuff and I just have to be nice to everybody. And it's like, no, that's not real. It's just avoidance. So as a world, we have to get out of this avoidance mode. This is very important, otherwise history will just keep repeating itself. And that's how people have fallen for this whole narrative and why they're just getting all these shots and getting boosters, and it's because they just don't want to deal with the way the world's working. They don't want to deal with the facts. And a big thing is they don't want to deal with and accept what's going on in the world, because it makes you look at yourself and it makes you ask, well, where in my life am I a liar? Where am I a gaslighter? That's part of the whole thing. That's why people don't want to acknowledge the way the world works, is because they have to acknowledge the way they act and feel and think. So, but we're at a turning point where you really have to make a decision and choose one or the other. So, we'll talk about this some more. And another thing about this eclipse is it's a double whammy, because shortly after this eclipse, Mars is going to reach the eclipse point. It's actually going to be, 3 weeks later, 3.5 weeks later. So the eclipse happened on December 4th and December 30th. Mars, which is at home in Scorpio, the ruler of Scorpio, it's going to conjunct the 18th degree of Scorpio, where the eclipse happened, where the solar eclipse happened. So basically Mars is going to step on a landmine. So Mars is pure fire, the sun is fire. Scorpio is a water sign, but it's like watery fire, because it is ruled by Mars. I think of it as like boiling water, you know, because it's like you're seething, boiling emotions that are underneath the facade of your persona. That might be very calm, that might be extremely nice all the time, that might grin like a Cheshire cat all the time. It's still there, it's always boiling. If you're alive and you're human, it's always boiling to some degree. So, when Mars hits that eclipse degree, that's when you're going to really start seeing the monsters coming out of the closet. But we need these monsters to come out of the closet because we've been living in a bullshit world for a long time. It's a thing I talk about in conversation. I'm going to make a video about this, but I always talk about how World War II destroyed America and the Western world, and the bullshit factor in the world since the end of World War II has been at a fever pitch. And I think more fake and more bullshitty than perhaps it's been in human history, you know, maybe since like the times of Atlantis. There was a lot of bullshit, a lot of, you know, denial, lying, all that stuff before that, but it was really brought to a whole new level. So we'll discuss this in a future video. But like I said, we need these monsters to come out of the closet because we can't live the American dream lie anymore, where you just, all you worry about is your dream house and your beautiful car and where your kids go to college and your nice clothes. All that stuff is great and it makes life better, but that's not what you're on earth to do. That's not what your life really means. So we have to get back to reality and having real meaning in our lives. So this eclipse is bringing those monsters out of the closet so we can find real meaning again and not just dwell in denial and superficiality and triviality. So let's talk about the particulars of this eclipse a bit. All right. So, one thing I like to look at with eclipses is where on Earth that they're fully visible. Because this tells you what part of the Earth, what countries, what peoples that it's going to affect the most. So this is a fascinating one. This is visible in Antarctica. So Antarctica is an interesting place. It's a giant landmass. I want to say it's bigger than the United States, maybe about the same size. The most controlled place on Earth to go there. Excuse me. To go to Antarctica, you have to have all kinds of permissions. You have to have UN permission, and the place is militarily controlled. At the very least, it's the G8 countries that have military bases there and research bases. So, you know, we're talking US, Britain, France, Russia, I think Germany's in the mix. The Australians, because they're close by. And, you know, some other countries as well. But they have these military bases, these research bases, and there's all kind, from the American standpoint, there's all kinds of merchants of death. So we're talking the military-industrial complex, you know, companies like Raytheon, who are playing with all kinds of frightening technology down there. And this is not just conspiracy theory, people who are engineers for these companies who work with the Department of Defense, NSA, CIA, they've all talked about this stuff, and these people check out. So a lot of frightening technology being played around with. It's extremely mysterious. And so the thing about the eclipse being visible in Antarctica is that because it is an international zone controlled by the world's leading economies, it means that it's going to affect the whole world, especially the empire that controls it. And that's a whole other thing too when you're talking about empires. We still live in a kind of a legal and a political fiction that took root in the 19th century, in the 1800s. So the 1800s gave birth to the nationalist movement, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, because you have all of these false progressives and these corporate communists that are just trying to take away our ethnicities, our cultures, our races, and in the guise of diversity, they just want to make us a bunch of wankers who are exactly the same. And you don't get diversity by just giving up your cultures and your languages and your ethnicities and your nationalities and just being uniform. Because then you just have a bunch of robots. So yeah. So point is we live in this fiction that goes back to the 1800s that countries are in charge. Countries are no longer in charge. Now, since the end of World War II, countries, governments, national governments have taken a back seat to the corporations. The major banks and corporations were the founders of the UN. They put the UN together so that they could do business internationally more efficiently. And so there would be a consensus international law that would resolve contract disputes and trade disputes and currency disputes. And when you're talking about currency, the World Bank and IMF were founded and brought into the mix, actually before the UN was founded, which goes to show you the UN is just this sort of governing body that oversees this banking business of the World Bank and the UN and all that stuff. So yeah, the bankers founded the UN and it created this extra-national, or you might say supranational government. And countries, individual countries, started being bound to these policies that the UN started making, which little by little started trumping and superseding the laws of the land of those member countries. So, you know, the UN is very coercive, in a very passive-aggressive, kind of a wimpy sort of a way. They don't take the military approach. They take the passive-aggressive approach. So, my whole point in that is that the world, the empires ruling the world right now are really banking and industrial and commercial empires. And they use these national governments as fronts. They use them as puppets to keep the people from revolting. And it's especially in the places where people are very self-righteous about democracy. Because democracy is just a scam to keep the peasants feeling important about themselves and feeling like they're in control so they don't rise up. So this is equally true of America as it is of China or Russia or wherever the hell, or even, you know, Bernie Sanders' paradise of Sweden. It's all the same. They're all owned by corporations, and the corporations and banks are much wealthier than any country out there. So getting back to the point, because this eclipse is visible in Antarctica, it's going to affect all of the global powers. So the puppet governments, and then the banks and the mega corporations behind them. It's going to affect them all. And what this is going to do, and especially when you factor in the fact that Venus, let me see, just in the month of December, there are two Venus and Pluto conjunctions. So one on December 11th with Venus direct. On December the 25th, the retrograde Venus will conjunct Pluto again. So both of those in Capricorn. And then in, I want to say February, early February, when Venus ends its retrograde and it ends the shadow period, it's going to conjunct Pluto again for a third time. So with that in mind, Venus retrograde is all about reevaluating our social relationships, our business partnerships. It's even about diplomacy. And because it's in Capricorn, it's going to deal with government. It's going to deal with how people and governments get along. This is going to cause the people to really take an inventory of how they're being treated by government, how they're being controlled, because Pluto can really deal with control. So people are going to feel really controlled with government. They're going to start pushing back. But one thing this is going to do is because Venus does deal with kind of the give and take of politics, it deals with diplomacy, and it does deal with business, because it's the ruler of Libra. Libra is business. The factions of the deep state are going to start undermining and fighting with each other more than ever. And this eclipse is really going to ramp this up. You know, the different factions of the deep state have always been undermining and fighting with each other, but they've been working towards common goals and common causes. And, you know, all of these, and again, you know, the deep state, it's not what a lot of internet conspiracy theorists make it out to be. It's just the mega banks and the mega corporations and the people within government that they have bought, bribed, or bullied in order to do what they want them to do, and blackmailed. So this deep state has different factions. You know, most people, they talk about the deep state, the Illuminati, the military, the CIA, the NSA, the government. There is no the any of that stuff. It's always been made of different factions who are very antagonistic to each other and who are always trying to get one up on each other. So they're not monolithic. They like being seen that way. It's basically like how in a lot of families, in more healthy families, well, I shouldn't say that, but because really in a healthy family you can be open and honest, but in a lot of families, parents don't want the children to see them fighting. When they are fighting and the children come around, they act like everything is great, and they're like, oh, we're fine, we're your parents, we don't fight. That's the way government has been acting, and the agencies of government have been acting. They want us to think that they're just these monolithic organizations where everybody's on one page and everybody follows the president, or, you know, whatever the hell. So it's going to become more and more apparent that this is not the case. And what you have with, you know, you want to call it the deep state, the Illuminati, the cabal, whatever name you like, you have sort of underdog factions and you have more overlord factions, and they share power and they share responsibilities. And this is what the Donald Trump presidency was all about. You know, Donald Trump is not, he's not the answer to anything, but he provides opposition to the status quo of the deep state. And really, he was backed by underdog factions of the deep state who, when they were recruited, they were told that, you know, they would make a bunch of money and they would suppress competition and innovation so they could just keep making money and stay on top. Well, these deep state players who sponsored Trump and people like him, they realized that they and their children and their grandchildren were slated for extermination and destruction by these globalist corporate communist agendas, you know, these false progressive agendas. They realized that with these shots and these that they were slated for health problems and sterility in order to get the world population down. So, you know, it was basically a lesser form of filth that sponsored and backed Donald Trump, who, you know, you might see as a lesser form of filth. And he is a vaccine pusher too, because you can't go against the drug companies right now as a national leader and live to tell the tale. You know, they own World Health Organization at this point, they own CDC, and they're puppeteering the government. You know, and they're turning those advisory bodies, World Health, CDC, into basically policymakers. It's really weird. They're being allowed to have powers that just don't belong to them. So yeah, you are going to see these deep state factions cooperate with each other less and less. And the fighting is going to become more and more apparent. And eventually, within the next few years, they're going to appeal to us, the people, to pick a side and fight for them. And this is going to get dangerous because you don't really get rewarded from backing any of these people. they'll both keep you, they both want to preserve this kind of financial slave system that's been going on here in America since the founding of the Federal Reserve in, what was that, 1912, 1913. They really don't want that to go away. So, you know, you may have to at times ally yourself with the side that you feel to be the right one, but don't look for rewards and don't look for liberation. Because they like the monopolies they control, they like being addicted to money, and they don't want their lifestyles going anywhere. So yeah. Now the other thing with this eclipse, because it's Scorpio again, it's humanity's unconscious emotions. Going to come to the surface more and more because, you know, illusions are being destroyed. Now this eclipse was Sun and Moon were conjunct K2. K2 is the destroyer of illusions. Rahu is the master of illusions. And Rahu uses these illusions to help us get the things that we desire. The desires that made us incarnate into this present life that we're all leading. So K2 is the destroyer of illusions. So this eclipse was about destroying the illusions, kind of in our unconscious emotions. You know, our thoughts, our views of the world, which are Sagittarius, are based on our unconscious emotions and assumptions, which are Scorpio. So this eclipse was all about basically doing a big house cleaning, a big renovation within our unconscious emotions, which these unconscious emotions and assumptions are the foundation for how we see the world and then how we proceed living our lives. So yeah, a lot of illusions being destroyed, and this also stirs unconscious emotions and brings them to the surface. We don't like having our illusions being destroyed. You know, we like to just see things the way we like to see them, and we will deny whatever we need to as humans, but can't do that anymore because we've been doing it for a very long time. So with that said, dark truths will start coming to light. I think some major stories will hit the media in the next few months, and then 2022 is going to be a bigger train wreck than 2021 was. It's going to be more chaotic, and this is going to give people the wiggle room and the breathing room to really understand who they want to be and to just live that life, whatever that looks like. So, you know, it's not like we're not going to starve to death. We're not going to have, you know, World War III nuclear war. We're not doing the Megadeth thing that they try to scare you about in the media, where you have these blowhard congressmen who are like, well, we're not taking the nuclear option against Russia off the table. And then we're not going to have all the Megadeth that the people in the alternative media who bitch about the mainstream media while using the same tactics in order to sell subscriptions and courses and all that stuff. We're not going to have that Megadeth. It's not, 2022 is not going to be a year of that. It's going to be a year where the hypnotism, the mind control, and sort of like the repression of who we really want to be is going to just start breaking down, and we're going to have opportunities to really be ourselves. Not everybody's going to seize this opportunity. Some people are going to double down on collectivism. They're just going to follow the Pied Piper and just do whatever the TV tells them, but it's going to be a great opportunity. So this eclipse is setting the tone for 2022, you know, not just the years to come. It's going to have a lot to do with what 2022 looks like. So what else? Yeah, I mentioned that Venus conjuncting Pluto 3 times within about, the space of about 2 months. And, you know, Venus retrograding from Capricorn back to Sagittarius. So Capricorn is responsibilities, it's government, it's officialdom. Sagittarius is beliefs, worldviews, philosophies, spirituality, higher knowledge. So basically, our relationships with figures of authorities are going to break down, and then we're going to, because Venus retrogrades back to Sagittarius, we're going to re-examine our beliefs about what government should be, what authority should be, even what finance should look like, how it should work. And this is not going to be all resolved in, before next Christmas, before Donald Trump gets sworn in, like everyone's talking about. It's going to take years to do this, but the end of the bullshit we've been living under is in sight. So this is very encouraging. But yeah, I just want to emphasize too, a lot of people are afraid, that like hell on earth is coming and, dystopian world government. And again, a lot of people in the alternative media are pushing this because they themselves are hypnotized and they actually worship the deep state, but they don't know it. It's like how so many, especially Christian and Muslim, like priests, preachers, ministers, whatever the hell you want to call them, they are some of the biggest Satan worshippers because they're always scaring the shit out of their followers and their congregations about Satan. Well, if you're afraid of something all the time and you're encouraging other people to be afraid of it all the time, you're actually worshiping it and giving it power. So a lot of alternative media people are actually the biggest deep state worshippers and the biggest deep state enablers and empowerers out there because they're always feeding it fear and they're getting other people to feed it fear. So this is something we have to be mindful of. So with that idea in mind, I always like to tell people, the closer that this deep state, cabal, Illuminati, whatever, the closest they get to achieving absolute power over the planet, the closer they get to losing everything they've worked for because, like I said, you have all these competing factions working together and they don't like each other any more than they like us, than they like just we the people. They just have things that they need from each other. So they have alliances and they work for common goals. But they're always ready to stab each other in the back. And they're always ready to sell out the government servants and, like the military people who advance their interests. So as they get closer to absolute power, they get closer to fighting each other and trying to kill each other because they don't want to share power. Each faction wants to be the dominating one in the end. So that's the thing to take comfort in. The closer they get to absolute power, the closer the downfall gets. Because they're not going to want to share. And at the end of the day, they would rather see the whole global system of control destroyed rather than letting it fall into a competing faction's hands. So remember this through all this. Everyone's like, oh, they're going to give everybody the mark of the beast, and oh, it's going to be hell, oh no, and Satan, and oh. It's like, no. They're going to start destroying each other the closer they get to absolute power. And we're going to watch them come down. So don't listen to the people. I'm not going to name any names, but don't listen to these alternative media people who are always trying to scare the shit out of you. Because they're deep state worshippers through and through. Yeah, and another thing too is just to re-emphasize, these deep state factions are going to start resenting the alliances that they've been working within, the power sharing agreements that they've been working in. When you get this Venus retrograding, they're going to be examining, especially these underdog factions of the deep state, like the Trump sponsors, those kind of factions. They're going to really start resenting how they have to play second fiddle to the more top dog overlord factions. And they're going to start cooking up more plans to undermine and backstab them. And they're going to start executing these plans. So just remember that. The relationships are going to break down. So, this is it's like I said in the December video, this is like the Ring of Power from Lord of the Rings. You got all these people trying to get it. Sauron wants it, who made it in the first place. but he doesn't have a physical body to go get it, so he sent out the ring wraiths to get it. But then Saruman wants it. Now Saruman is the underdog faction of that deep state between Saruman and Sauron, the wizard Saruman. He is like a sidekick to Sauron. He's playing second fiddle to him. He's helping him. But you see in those movies that Saruman is having these delusions that he and Sauron are going to share power once all of the kingdoms of men, like Gondor and Rohan are just wiped off the map. And basically the humans are exterminated, which is what the people in this world are trying to do. They want to exterminate people to get world population to what they think is sustainable. Instead of innovating things like food production and energy, they just want to do some exterminating, and they're doing it. They're drowning people with while they're on ventilators. So yeah, anyway, this whole thing, this global control system in our world, it's like the ring of power. And some of the Sarumans, the underdogs in deep state, some of them are delusional and they think that they're going to share power. Definitely the civil servants who are part of this agenda, and like the most of the generals and the admirals who are been advancing this globalist agenda, they think power is going to be shared. They're going to get sold out. So again, with that ring of power, Sauron wants it. He's using Saruman, he sends the ring wraiths out, then Gollum wants it, and then Frodo wants to destroy it. But as the journey goes on, Frodo starts to desire it too. So eventually the ring is destroyed, in spite of all of these people who are desiring it and trying to get to it. So similar things are going to happen in our world. It's going to look scary, it's going to be messy, but they're going to destroy each other. And, the ring of power, the control system, will be destroyed in spite of themselves. So how am I doing? Another long one. So a few more details here. So, especially when we get into the chart here. So we have this eclipse, again, 18 degrees of Scorpio. It's in the Nakshatra, the lunar mansion of Jyeshta. So this is a very powerful Nakshatra. It can be ruthless. It deals with the warfare mentality, winning at all costs. And Jaishta is really the dark side of Scorpio, which is sometimes necessary. You can't just be grinning like a Cheshire cat all the time. And life is not unicorns and rainbows all the time. It's a balance. If you are just always love and light, you don't deal with the darker things of life, you're basically addicted to giddiness and you're out of balance. So you have to have balance in life. You can't just be light, you can't just be dark, you have to be both. And that's when the darkness has power over you, is when you won't acknowledge it. And you think you're saving people and you think you're doing all these great things, but you're actually destructive. So yeah, Jyeshta is the dark side of Scorpio. It can be paranoid, can be frightened, reactive, vengeful, protective, prideful, confused. It's like a powder keg ready to go off. And the moon is debilitated in Scorpio. It's where it's at its weakest. And this makes it, when planets are here, it makes it difficult for people to be logical. They can have very turbulent and wild mood swings, and their emotions can really get away from them. So, but an interesting thing here is that the Jyeshta Nakshatra is ruled by Indra. So Indra is the thunder god of the Vedic pantheon. And, in ancient times, really, Indra was basically the chief deity. In the ancient Vedas, Indra was, most of the hymns in the Vedas were dedicated to Indra. So, thunder gods are protectors of humanity, they're protectors of the earth, they're protectors of the sun. in the mythology, especially in the Vedic mythology, the east is seen as the direction of the thunder god because it worships the rising sun, and the rising sun is the soul. You know, the soul is a macrocosmic version. I mean, the sun is a macrocosmic version of the soul, just like the moon is a macrocosm of the mind. You know, the mind reflects the light of the soul, and the moon reflects the light of the sun. The moon doesn't have its own light, and neither does the mind. The mind needs the light of the soul, the moon needs the light of the sun. So they're analogs for each other. So, yeah, the thunder god protects and worships the soul. And the interesting thing too is that the thunder god is a representation of a retrograde Jupiter. So a direct Jupiter that's moving forward is a very kind of kumbaya, very smiley, lighthearted, all-inclusive sort of a guru, like a spiritual teacher, a priest, a priestess. When it goes retrograde, when we perceive it as moving backwards, it turns into Indra, it turns into Thor. Thor is the kind of the Germanic, Norse, kind of Nordic equivalent of Indra. And so Thor throws hammers at the heads of enemies. Indra throws the lightning bolts. Even Zeus, a thunder god, throws the lightning bolts. And this Jupiter retrograde is really a priest conducting spiritual warfare. So, and in the mythology, the warriors, you know, like Mars or like Tyr, as he's called in Norse and Germanic mythology, or Tiu, where we get the word Tuesday, this Martian war god looks to Jupiter for guidance, looks to the priest for guidance. And it's always been like this with warriors and militaries throughout human histories. They look to the class of priests and priestesses for guidance. They look at them as quest givers. So when you get a retrograde Jupiter, or you get an eclipse in this constellation, this Nakshatra ruled by the thunder god, this is a time when the thunder god goes to war against corruption. This is the time when the priest gets its weapons and conducts spiritual warfare. So it goes from being the kumbaya spiritual teacher to being the priest going to war with the warriors to destroy corruption and just disregard for humanity, for nature, for universal law, for the laws of nature, for spirituality. So this is laying some groundwork for really people rising up, standing up for themselves, because again, the thunder gods like Thor, like Indra, are all protectors of humanity. That's the thing in the mythology, is Thor is always in the east, direction of the rising sun. Also the giant home. So the giants are forces of nature, of expansiveness. This is something we get into in rune readings. People who've had rune readings with me, we get into all these, the 9 worlds. So the 8 worlds that are at the 8 compass points that surround the world we live in. Giant home is one of those. It's in the east and it deals with expansiveness and like your identity and your boundaries. So again, in the mythology, Thor is always in the east fighting trolls and giants. So when Thor is fighting these trolls and giants, he's basically fighting internal negativity. He's fighting the forces of the lower self that are not in harmony with the soul and are not submitting to the leadership of the soul. So, the lower self is not a bad thing. It's just, it becomes inappropriate and it does inappropriate things when it's not following the soul. And it's not because that these forces of the lower self are evil, it's because we as souls often fail to demonstrate proper leadership over our lower self and within our lives. So, and that's where ritual and all that stuff comes in. That's why when I do rune readings, astrology readings, I give everyone a custom meditation. You know, with the astrology readings, we have Sanskrit mantras for the planets, for your planet of destiny. With the runes, I always give a rune to meditate on, to rebalance the mind. And that's the value of the Qigong that I teach, is these are all rituals to reorder the lower self. They're tools for exerting the leadership of the soul onto the lower self and getting it back in balance. So yeah, so that's the thunder gods are, you know, they're this force of lightning, this lightning power which protects the soul, the heart center, and allows us to fight internal negativity within ourselves and an external negativity in the world. So another thing about this eclipse too is it happened 2 degrees away from Antares. So the eclipse was at 18 degrees of Scorpio. Antares, the fixed star, which is the heart of the Scorpion, is at 16 degrees of Scorpio. Antares is basically like one of the most belligerent stars. It's a star of war. It's one of the most powerful of the fixed stars. It deals with mystical powers. It deals with manifestation because it's all about bringing into being what you think about and dwell upon the most. And you know, Scorpio deals with the things that we think about, you know, the things that we brood over, the things that we ruminate over, and the fixations within our own conscious, you know, things that we desire. So yeah, Antares, like Scorpio, does deal with manifestation, you know, manifestation of desires. So, and Antares also deals with like hidden spiritual powers, hidden occult powers. So this is basically about finding the wherewithal deep within ourselves, in our deep emotions, in our deep unconscious emotions, to make our lives and our worlds what we really want them to be. So very powerful eclipse here. And as I mentioned, on December 30th, Mars comes through to this eclipse degree, this 18 degrees of Scorpio. So Mars is going to, like I said, going to step on a landmine that the eclipse laid. So solar eclipse, that's fire. And Mars is fire, so it's going to be like this double fire. And that's when I see it as the people of the world really pushing back against people who are trying to micromanage and dominate them. So, you know, the big banks, the big drug companies, trickling their agenda down through their political puppets. People are going to start pushing back against that. And I forgot to mention earlier, another place where the eclipse was visible was south coast of Australia and the southern tip of New Zealand. So Melbourne, I think the second largest city in Australia. I think Sydney is the largest. One of the largest cities in Australia and the most locked down city in the world is Melbourne in the state of Victoria on the south coast. So since this eclipse was visible there, I think we're going to see major pushback from the Australian people, especially the people of Melbourne. So they're going to get sick of this micromanagement and these forced vaccinations that have the objective of sterilizing people and causing health problems. And you know, this is being done because, again, the major players in the deep state don't think the population is sustainable. And really they think that the people of the world are just as vacuous and empty and devoid of a real identity as they are. So they think that we want to be bossed around and micromanaged. So people are slowly getting very sick of this. And I think, you know, by the end of the month, we're going to start seeing some flashpoints. We're going to start seeing people fighting for their freedom. And another thing here that we have going on is, in this very sign where all this happened, we're going to have Mars and Ketu meet up. And for most of the month, you have, because let me see, yeah, it was the 5th of December where Mars went to Scorpio. So through most of the month, you've got Sun, Mars, and Ketu all in Scorpio the whole time. So a lot of anger, a lot of potential for fighting. I don't see international war kicking off at this point. I think people are overplaying that scenario, that hypothetical scenario. I think we're already in World War III. World War III is this deep state, this cabal, this Illuminati, fighting against humanity, trying to exterminate people to reduce the population, trying to take our cultures, our nationalities, our identities, our countries, our languages, and just making us robots, uniform robots, and getting us to think that that is diversity. So, yeah, a lot of pushback here. It is very encouraging. I want to check that conjunction here. Oh, right. 15th of December. That is the Mars K2 conjunction. 7 degrees of Scorpio. So, yeah, this also, because it's in that sign where the eclipse happened, it's going to further this ruthless destruction of our illusions. In K2, as I've mentioned before, K2 is a lot like the Norse goddess Hel, who is the ruler of the underworld. Rulers of the underworld are not tormentors, they're not torturers. They are the angel of death. And the angel of death is either an angel of light, that's a liberator, that frees you from your time here on Earth in this world of illusions, or it's a terrible, skeleton monster like the Grim Reaper. Depends how attached you are to the illusion that, you can stay here forever and keep your money forever and keep all of your earthly pleasures forever. It's good to enjoy all that stuff, but you can't keep it forever. And so really the angel of death, or Hel, the goddess of the underworld, she's either a liberator in this being of light, or she's, a monster. And in a lot of Hel's depictions, her face is split down the middle. On one half, she's a beautiful young woman. The other half, she's a corpse. When she's the beautiful woman, it's when you're in balance. It's when you can just let go of life when you reach the end of it. And it's when you're not hanging on to your illusions about your life and about why your life is the way that it is. It's when you're not blaming people and really making excuses for yourself. So, but yeah, this Mars K2 conjunction in Scorpio can also indicate fundamentalism, violence, terrorism, the escalation of volatility. Around 9/11, you had Mars and K2. Can't remember if it was conjunct or they're very close together, but they're very close in Sagittarius. So Mars and K2 together, it gives people the feeling of like an assurance of victory on the one hand. It helps people feel like they've already won and that they're unbeatable. And it can give people a feeling of righteousness because K2 can represent like spiritual practitioners like monks and nuns and spiritual ascetics. All of these spiritual people, when they get out of balance, they can be very fundamentalist. They can act like terrorists. When you get the violence and volatility and warrior energy of Mars in the mix, that can be violent and fundamentalist, kind of like a terrorist. So I think people could get desperate and they could act violent with everything that they're facing. So this is a big time right now. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I'm going to leave it at that. Of course, there's more to talk about, but we all only have so much time. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate everybody who watches this channel, who likes, subscribes, shares, comments, the whole bit. And keep an eye on my, if this channel ever goes down, you don't see any new videos, check my Brighteon, check my BitChute. I'll always put those links in the comments. And if you have not had a Vedic astrology reading with me or a rune reading, you'll be happy. And so if you have not had a Vedic astrology reading with me or a rune reading with me, so thanks again. If you've not had a reading with me, whether that's a Vedic astrology reading, a rune reading with me, and you're considering it, you'll be very happy when you do. Both of these types of readings are great ways to take kind of a different look at your life, to get an outside perspective. It ends up confirming a lot of things you intuitively knew about yourself and what you wanted out of life and what you really want to do with your life, but may not have had full confidence in. And then the Qigong that I teach, I have these videos for download. This is a great mind-body practice to really harmonize the different levels of yourself, your mind and your body, to let your soul shine through so you can create more of the things in life that you want. These practices have changed my life. I'm running a class right now out of my office for Heart Center, Qigong. All of these practices have been life-changing for me. They've really helped me to work out a lot of emotional baggage, to work out a lot of like PTSD and things like that. But heart-centered Qigong definitely has a very special place in my heart, because the heart center is where your soul lives, and your soul is here to live out its desires. So check that stuff out. I'll put the link to my website in the comments. I need to make some trailers for those videos too. Take some of the mystery out of it. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.